So welcome everyone to Stemming the Tide of Aquatic Invasive Species. My name is Rachel DeVos and I'm Director of Policy and Advocacy here at the AUMA. Between domestic fish being dumped into stormwater ponds and invasive mussels moving westward through Ontario and Manitoba towards Alberta, municipalities are increasingly concerned about aquatic invasive species. Based on a 2013 member resolution, AUMA advocated for legislative amendments to provide the enforcement authority needed to prevent an invasion of mussels into the province. And this last spring, amendments were made to Alberta's Fishery Act, which the spring before in 2015, amendments were made to Alberta's Fishery Act, which require mandatory inspection of boats and watercraft that are transported into our province, and Kate will be talking more about that in just a moment. At the request of AUMA and AMDNC, the Saskatchewan Urban Municipalities Association and the Saskatchewan Association of Rural Municipalities are also advocating for the Government of Saskatchewan to establish mandatory inspection stations and increase monitoring for invasive mussels in time for the summer 2016 boating season. And we're really pleased to have representatives of both SUMA and SARM participating on the webinar today, along with representatives of AMDNC. So great to have everybody here working together. And with that, we are really pleased to be working so closely with the Government of Alberta on this issue, and Kate Wilson, who is the province's Aquatic Invasive Species Specialist, and who can be seen in this picture flexing her good mussels, not the invasive mussels. So she's, as I said, she's this Aquatic Invasive Species Specialist with the Fish and Wildlife Policy Division of Alberta Environment and Parks. Or not in Alberta Environment, oh yeah, Alberta Environment and Parks, just not forestry anymore. Kate has worked on aquatic invasive species issues and management for the past several years, both in Idaho helping to implement a prevention program and in Florida during graduate school. She's excited to lead the development of Alberta's provincial aquatic invasive species program to protect the freshwater resources and all the critters that live there. So I'll turn things over to Kate. And as I said, if you have questions throughout, just type them in and we'll get them to them at the end.
Okay, welcome everyone. I'm excited to be here, so thank you for the invitation and the interest, as always. I do have a fair amount of slides, so I'm going to go kind of quickly. So yeah, if you do have questions, just go ahead and type them in and we'll get to them at the end. So this is my favorite photo to begin. It is just a year now that we've had these mandatory inspections, so whenever I see this sign, I still get very excited. And I do also want to share, I was just in Saskatchewan last week at the Saskatchewan Association of Watersheds conference, where they invited me to speak, and I told them I came to terrify them, but then to give them hope. And that is exactly, I hope what happened, because this is a really scary issue that really binds us together. There's a lot of things that we can do to work together. But it's important in a situation like this where there's invaders coming in all kinds of pathways, and sometimes it feels kind of depressing, that there is hope. And really 2 years ago we didn't have a program, so it's an important thing to keep in mind. So I'm going to go ahead and get started here. So I think we all know this, but let's just be on the same page about what we're referring to when we talk about aquatic invasives. I still get a fair amount of questions about, is blue-green algae an invasive species? No, because it is native, unfortunately, and it is actually like in the sediment of the mud, so it doesn't meet the criteria for an invasive. Invasives are non-native to the watershed, and I do clarify watershed because species like Didymo, for example, rock snot, fun to say, not fun to spread. It is native to certain parts of Western Canada, but expanding in range in places where it really can do a lot of damage. So I would also look at species on the landscape like mountain pine beetle. So that is also native to certain parts of Western Canada, but where it has expanded, creating a lot of economic and environmental hardship. Generally, because they're not from here, these species are not going to have a natural predator or anything to really keep them in check. So that's why invasives tend to really get the upper edge over native species. And then the global definition that is used is these species have to pose a risk to the economy, the environment, or human health. And species like zebra and quagga mussels that we're going to talk about a fair amount today really do pose a threat to all three of those things. So where do they come from? People move around more than they ever have before, and they buy all kinds of stuff from all over the world. So this graphic shows you the global shipping routes across the world, and you can see places like the Great Lakes where a lot of those ships are going. It totally makes sense why that becomes the initial introduction site, because these big ships come across the ocean a lot of the time from freshwater ports, and they enter the Great Lakes, they release their ballast water, and in that water are fish, invertebrates like mussels, plant fragments, parasites, disease that are still viable after that long trip across the ocean. This also would include just people buying things on the internet and trade being more vibrant than it ever has before. With trade comes hitchhikers, unfortunately. So there are efforts on the federal side to really work on this ballast water issue, and hopefully that means over time we will see less species being introduced to North America. So invasive mussels, I just really want to make this point that they are the perfect poster child for really raising awareness with the public and stakeholders about this issue, because they really do have impacts on so many things. And the economic driver is really big as well. So we're not only concerned about mussels, it's just that they really scare the crap out of everyone. So it's a good place to start and really build on it from there. So why do we care so much about these mussels? Well, they can live up to 30 days out of the water. So that means, let's say you left Lake Havasu, little summer bird you, and you had mussels on your boat. You could actually drive in the right conditions, as far as you really wanted to in a month, right, and back, and stop at lakes and reservoirs on the way, and those mussels would still be viable on your boat. So that is a really scary prospect, and it's a really long time for any aquatic species to live out of water. They're filter feeders, so the ecological impacts are huge. That means that they filter out the nutrients from the water, which means the fish, and then really the entire food web over time is greatly impacted by these critters being there. And like most aquatic invasives, there aren't a lot of great control options should we have a problem. So should we ever have a detection, we need to put our effort now into the emergency, which is prevent them before they get here. And then finally, I don't really spend too much time talking about what they look like, what colors, how big, because the fact is, if you see any mussel or clam that is attached to anything, a boat motor, a dock, a piling, a rock on the beach, the fact that it's physically attached means that it's an invasive species. So no native mussels can physically attach like that. So again, if you're at a gas station, you see a boat pull up, there's attached mussels on the boat, you're going to memorize our hotline number and report it right away. This is a graphic from the state of Idaho, so I am a little biased because I did come from there. But they have a really aggressive prevention program, and this map shows you of the 60,000 boats that were inspected in Idaho last season, how many of them came from different places. So every U.S. state, every Canadian province is represented by those dots. People are traveling with their boats more than ever before, and if you look at all the dots in Canada, where are most of them? Here in Alberta. I believe that most of these are probably snowbirds who either take their boats down south or buy a boat in the States while they're there and bring it back up and were inspected in Idaho. So that's pretty scary, and it is the #1 source of introductions for things like mussels and even plants. Plants can hitchhike on boats really well.